All right, STR, short-term rentals.
Yeah.
You said you got into those. What has worked with them? What's your portfolio look like? How have you found success with them?
So we have 36 short-term rentals.
Where
In Boise, Idaho, and Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah.
Why
and
Boise?
one in the mountains. I was born there. So, yeah. So that's just where I started building my portfolio. And so in the short-term rental story, so we had traditional rentals. I think we had 17 units at the time. And I was living in, I don't know, Peru or Ecuador. I can't remember. And we had come back to the U.S. And because we had tenants in all of our houses, we couldn't stay in any of our houses. So we had somebody from the church. They lent us their house. We got back to the U.S. late. We got to the house at 1 o'clock in the morning. We walked in, and I took like 3 steps into the house and realized I was walking in like 2 or 3 inches of water. So the house was flooded. And so by 3 o'clock in the morning, we got the water main shut off, called the owner, and crashed in a hotel. And we have a family of 5. And so the next morning I wake up, it's just a disaster. And I'm like, we cannot do this. And my wife said, oh, have you heard about that? What is it? Airbnb? You know, like it was 2016, right? It's like, okay, yeah. So I opened an account in Boise, Idaho, looking for a 3-bedroom house. It was September. It wasn't even like summer peak season. September, there were only 3 houses, and they were all like $160 and up per night. And I was like, how much am I getting for my houses? Like $30 a night.
Yeah.
And so that started the wheels turning. A couple months later, I switched a couple of my units to short-term rentals. That went so well, I flipped my entire portfolio by the end of the year. And so I switched everything over to short-term rentals in 2016. Yeah.
So what are the changes you've seen in short-term rentals over the last, last 8
so
years?
Like I said earlier, yesterday's luxury is today's expectation. The quality that you have to produce just keeps getting higher and higher. The amenities that you offer has to keep getting higher and higher. COVID was an unnatural spike. The hangover after COVID was an unnatural trough, right? And now what we're seeing is finally for the last 5 or 6 months, we've had month-over-month gains from the same month previous year in daily rate and occupancy or total rent. And so we're finally starting to recover from that. So yeah, that's what I see in our markets anyway.
How about legality-wise or legislation?
Yeah.
Have they been cracking down? Like, if laws change, how do you navigate that?
So
that
there
side?
are 5 or 6 states that passed laws back in 2016 that actually protected property owners' rights for short-term rentals. Idaho was one of them, and Arizona was one of them. So those are the 2 states that I'm invested in, and I would only invest in states that have a law similar to that. Now, they are able to regulate, so they can charge a license fee and all this kind of stuff, but they cannot prohibit it. And so that is where I would choose to invest. But yeah, there's some other markets like New York where it's basically banned.
Yeah.
San Francisco, too, which is where Airbnb came from, ironically. Where it's basically banned. So yeah,
Hawaii
there's
is
challenges.
basically banned unless you're in like a hotel zoned
Exactly.
like condo here, but that makes the opportunity massive.
Exactly.
For those spots.
I was just going to say that if you can get into an HOA community,
Yeah.
for example, that doesn't allow it, but you can somehow get grandfathered in, that is a valuable property, right? Not only for your cash flow while you own it, but when you sell it, because you can sell it, this is Airbnb approved or short-term rental approved, right? So yeah, if you can get a license in a market where it's restricted, that's actually maybe even a better place to invest.
I agree.
So
Yeah, my Airbnbs just print money.
Yeah.
And it's
because
like,
there's so few available.
So few available, yeah.
Right.
Like $300-$400 a night, $500 a night for
Yeah.
like a little condo.
Yeah.
And and the condos I bought, they're called lock-offs, so there's like 2 sides of them.
Right, right.
And so I can rent them each separately. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
one usually goes for about $300, one goes about $400. I'm
Okay.
like, that's $700 a night.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. And
Yeah.
I rented 28 nights a month.
Yeah.
Like it's always booked because they don't have many here.
Yeah,
and
right.
So it's super. Yeah. Whenever people are like, "Oh yeah, you can't do Airbnb in my area," I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
you can. It's
Yeah.
hard. Pick your hard."
Like Denver's very strict on short-term rentals.
Yeah.
But if you're just outside of that boundary, you can do well because you're close enough to downtown, but you can.
So I know people though in Denver that got destroyed by that because they made a rule basically overnight where it was like it has to be your personal residence and you can't do it for more than 15 nights a month.
Right.
And so I had a buddy actually who had like 30 of them, and then overnight his business completely went away.
Yeah.
Fortunately for him, he bought them all right, and
Cheap,
Denver
yeah.
appreciated over time, so he just sold them all and made a ton of money.
Yeah.
But that could happen.
Yeah.
That's
That
my
is the danger
fear
of
with
newer-
a lot of new
It's like,
investors.
like you mentioned Bitcoin earlier,
Yeah,
crypto.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
that's the fear. Airbnb's been around for 5 years.
Yeah.
So like, I like having backup plans. Like
Yeah.
I could rent out my condos, traditional, like normal rental,
Yeah.
and I could pay the mortgage.
All of my properties, I could flip them to traditional rentals
Yep.
and at least break even.
Yep, that's what I would always.
That's
shoot
always
for.
how I underwrite, and
Yep,
I would always advise that.
So when you switched your portfolio over to short-term rentals, did you just get lucky and buy in the right areas where that worked,
No,
or did
they
you?
were not ideal.
Oh, they were not ideal.
I mean,
Okay.
they were rentals, right?
Yeah.
So I had fourplexes, and they're just like 2-bedroom, 2-bath, fourplex, basic, not really not super nice units. We did everything we could to clean them up and make them nice, and back in 2016, the luxury expectation was pretty low, so it wasn't a problem. And since then, I've upgraded to better properties, but no, they were not ideal for it. But it was just such a at least in the beginning, what I would always say is that short-term rentals was double the revenue and triple the profit, right? Over traditional rentals, and even just on in a normal neighborhood.
Yeah. I think that's a misconception, is that all Airbnbs are like they have to be in a luxury area overlooking the ocean in Hawaii. It's like people travel for lots of reasons, and they need a place to stay.
We have an Airbnb in St. Louis that's just in a random neighborhood. It's probably a $350,000 house. There's nothing special. It's not a great location, but people still have to travel there for work, graduations, funerals. We see a lot of people traveling for funerals, for their kids, because it's St. Louis. It is in the middle of the United States, and so there's a lot of sports stuff there. But there's nothing special about it. It is not in a cool area. You can't walk to bars. You can't walk to restaurants, and it still does really well. And so I think
your costs are lower than if you're in those prime areas, right?
Yeah, I think if you want to succeed in that area, like of Airbnb, you have to learn the rules. Learn how to break the rules legally, and then learn figure out what everyone else is not doing, like you just mentioned there. And if you can do those things, they require some upfront work. It's the people that are like, oh, I'm going to buy an Airbnb, and so they take some course maybe for an hour, and they're like, oh, I'm going to go buy that one over there. Like, you're not putting in the work to learn how to do it right. Maybe over time you'll be fine, but Airbnb can be phenomenal if you work it right.
But it can be bad too.
It can be brutal if you're not doing it right. And again, with having a backup plan like you have is great. How about financing? Like, how have you found financing on those? Or do you just own them cash, or have you just got normal mortgages?
So I'm kind of doing a burster. Okay. It was a new term I've heard over on the Bigger Pockets folks. So a burr with a short-term rental on the back end. So that's what I've been doing since I've come back from the field. Which, funny thing, I wanted to tell you. So when I came back from the mission field, I had, several $1 million worth of real estate. And I'd been investing since I was 19 years old. And I really felt like I knew nothing about real estate investing. I knew relatively little. And so when I came back and I had nothing to do, I went to Google and I was like, real estate education, blunk, and Bigger Pockets popped up. I don't know if it was first, but it was on the first page. You ever heard the phrase, if you want to hide a dead body, put it on the second page of Google? Yeah. So you were on the first page. I found you, and literally for a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, I just listened to another episode or two. Awesome. And I started in the middle, and I heard Burr and ARV, and I didn't know all this alphabet. I didn't know this stuff. So I went back to the beginning, and not the very beginning, but I've listened to most of those episodes.
That's awesome.
And you had a big impact on me as I came back decompressed out of the mission field. So
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I love hearing that.
So with the burster, tell me about financing on that.
Yeah.
Will they will they only refinance it at a long-term rental rate, or will they take the short-term rental rate and say, hey, you say you're going to get $3,500 a month, and so we can use that when we're giving you financing?
Well, I have the benefit of being able to say I have 35 of these, and this is whatever you want to look at. Here you go. This is my cash flow. My debt to equity is very low across the whole portfolio. And some bankers, they still don't care, right? These bean counters are just like, nope, that doesn't check the box, right? But I've found a few lenders that will accept a property. Some of them like to have at least a couple of months as a short-term rental so that they can show, okay, yes, it's generating rent and this is what it's going to do. It's not easy, right? Yeah, short-term rental financing isn't as easy as traditional rental financing, even though it's double the revenue and triple the profit. For whatever reason, it's a challenge. But yeah, I just keep looking for lenders until I find one that's willing to go along with it.
Well, you illustrate a really good point here in that I think most newbie real estate investors look at financing and they assume that all banks are the same banks. All lenders are the same lenders. And so they go to Chase Bank or Bank of America and it's like, no. So it's like, all right, I guess I can't do that. It doesn't work. But there's so many different types of lenders out there, and there's small local community banks and
credit unions.
Yeah, one of our friends, actually, somebody lives here on Maui recently, their lender said, hey, we don't want to do any more loans with you. We've already done like 20 or 30 with you. We're done right now. We're going to wait for a few, whatever. The market's changing. And so this friend of ours just got on a plane, flew back to their city, spent a week there just talking to bankers, came back with 3 new lenders. Yeah. It just get it done. Get it done. It's like, I think she went and interviewed 20 different ones, but found 3, came back home, and now she's buying real estate again.
Most of my loans are through credit unions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Just like they're focused on the community where you're developing, and they're more willing to do creative stuff sometimes. Yeah.